The rhythm of sandpaper against walnut was Garrett Pierce's meditation. 60 grit, first working with the grain, coaxing out the hidden beauty most folks would never notice. His father taught him that 32 years dead now, but the lessons stuck harder than any college degree. A man's worth lived in what his hands could build and who he chose to build it for. The rest was just noise. The grand ballroom of the Ashford estate glittered with the kind of wealth that made honest labor invisible. 300 guests in designer suits and silk gowns pretended not to notice the 52-year-old carpenter adjusting the centerpiece table he'd spent 6 weeks crafting. $80,000 for this job, enough to keep Ivy in her prep school another year, maybe fix the leak in the shop roof before winter hit hard. Garrett stepped back, surveying his work under the crystal chandeliers. The wood grain caught the light just right, each joint invisible unless you knew where to look. Pride was a dangerous thing, but this table deserved it. His phone buzzed Ivy, texting from the car where she was supposed to be sleeping. "Can we get ice cream on the way home? Please, please, please." He smiled despite the ache in his lower back. 9 years old and already mastering the art of negotiation. Elena would have loved watching their daughter grow into this fierce little person. 5 years gone, and some mornings he still reached for her side of the bed, expecting warmth. Movement caught his eye across the ballroom. A young woman in a beige dress, simple compared to the peacock display around her, walking with careful precision toward the back corner. Her right arm ended at the wrist, replaced by a prosthetic that caught the light with a dull metallic sheen. She carried herself like someone accustomed to being watched, chin up, but eyes fixed on a destination that made Garrett's stomach twist. The dying palm tree. Behind it sat a folding table with a paper tablecloth, the kind used for overflow at church potlucks. One chair, one place setting, tucked away like something shameful that needed hiding. The waiter directing her there, Jonah Garrett had shared a smoke break with him earlier, couldn't meet her eyes. The kid's discomfort radiated across 20 feet of imported marble. 200 pairs of eyes tracked her progress with the practiced indifference of people who'd perfected the art of looking without seeing. Garrett recognized that walk. He'd walked it himself at Elena's funeral, feeling the weight of every pitying glance while trying to hold Ivy's hand steady. The woman reached her isolated table and sat back, straight face carefully blank. In her left hand she clutched something small, a wooden object Garrett's trained eye identified immediately. Hand-carved walnut, maybe the kind of piece someone made with love rather than profit in mind. A woman at the neighboring table leaned toward her companion, voice pitched to Carrie. Linda Harwick, according to the seating chart Garrett had memorized while installing the tables. Real estate mogul, 3 divorces. Reputation for collecting gossip like some people collected art. Can you believe Sienna actually invited her? After everything the Ashfords did for that girl? Her companion Dorothy, something dripping with diamonds that probably cost more than Garrett's house, scoffed with practiced cruelty. We all know why Harrison really adopted her. His company was hemorrhaging money after those layoffs. Taking in a disabled orphan was the best PR move he ever made. The woman at the corner table flinched, barely visible, just a slight hitch in her shoulders, but Garrett caught it. His hand tightened around the screwdriver in his tool belt, hard enough to hurt. The jazz quartet shifted to something slower, meant to be romantic. The bride, Sienna Ashford, 25 and glossy as a magazine cover, glided past in $30,000 of imported lace. Her laugh rang out like breaking glass, artificial and sharp. When her gaze swept over the corner table, Garrett saw it clearly: satisfaction, cruel and deliberate. That's when his feet started moving. "Mark, where are you going?" One of the event coordinators grabbed his sleeve. "They're about to serve the salmon." He pulled free with the kind of gentle force that came from handling fragile wood. "Something I need to do." The walk across that ballroom felt like moving through honey, every eye gradually turning to track his progress. A man in a work shirt and tool belt walking away from his designated place, walking toward the girl everyone had agreed to ignore. She didn't look up when his shadow fell across her table. Probably learned not to expect kindness from well-dressed strangers at fancy parties. His voice came out rougher than intended, ground down by years of sawdust and silence. "I'm Garrett Pierce. Worked on the woodwork here. Couldn't help noticing you're sitting alone." Her head lifted slowly, eyes the color of old whiskey, assessing him for the trap. "It's fine. This is where they wanted me." The resignation in those words hit harder than any hammer to the thumb. Garrett pulled out the empty chair across from her without invitation, settling his weight with deliberate calm. "Here's the thing. My daughter's 9 years old. She made me promise to make at least one friend at this circus. She worries about me being lonely since her mother passed." The woman's carefully constructed mask cracked slightly, surprise breaking through. "Would you do me a favor and pretend you're with me just for tonight? You'd really be helping me out." Her breath caught audibly. She searched his face for the joke, for the cruelty that must be hiding behind those kind brown eyes. Garrett held still, letting her look. He'd learned patience from Wood. Some things couldn't be rushed. "Your daughter." Her voice emerged, cracked, uncertain. "She sounds very wise. Wiser than her old man most days." Garrett let himself smile, the expression transforming the tired lines of his face into something warmer. "So, what do you say? My table has an empty seat and I could use the company. These finance types have been talking about tax codes for 20 minutes. A laugh escaped her. Small surprise, the first genuine sound of joy she'd probably made all evening. "I don't know anything about tax codes." "Perfect. Neither does anyone else. They just pretend." Garrett stood, offering his arm like his grandfather taught him 100 years ago. "Shall we?" She stared at his extended elbow. "I'm Catherine." "Cat." People will stare. The simplicity of her name contrasted sharply with the complexity of whatever hell she'd been living. "Let them." She stood slowly, her hand trembling as she placed it in the crook of his elbow. The prosthetic was cool against his forearm precision engineering that probably cost more than his truck. Together they began walking back across the reception hall. The whispering started immediately, rippling outward from their path like waves from a thrown stone. "Everyone," Garrett announced as they reached his assigned table, pulling out the empty chair beside his own with deliberate ceremony. "This is Catherine. Catherine, these are my associates from the event planning committee." The coordinator, who'd grabbed his arm earlier, sat with her mouth open. James from the catering staff choked on his wine. Garrett smiled pleasantly, helping Kat into her seat as if this was the most natural thing in the world. The table fell into shocked silence. "Do you know who that is?" the coordinator hissed, leaning close enough for her perfume to sting his nose. "That's the Ashfords' adopted daughter, the one they stuck in a corner to eat alone at her own sister's wedding." Garrett's voice remained pleasant, but something underneath it carried the weight of 30 years swinging a hammer. "Yes, I noticed." The storm arrived in silver heels and righteous fury approximately 90 seconds later. Victoria Ashford descended upon their table like an avenging angel in designer silk, her husband Harrison trailing behind with a face flushed from too much scotch and barely controlled rage. "Catherine." Victoria's voice could have frozen champagne mid-pour. "What do you think you're doing?" Every conversation within 30 feet stopped. The jazz quartet seemed to play quieter, as if the musicians sensed brewing drama worth hearing. Kat shrank into herself, that practiced submission returning instantly like muscle memory. "Mrs. Ashford." Garrett stood slowly, positioning himself slightly between Victoria and Kat. The movement wasn't aggressive, just present. "I'm Garrett Pierce, ma'am. I invited Catherine to join our table." "Is there a problem?" Victoria's Botox-smoothed face tried to express outrage, achieving only a slight eyebrow twitch. "This is a family matter, Mr. Pierce. You don't understand the situation." "Then enlighten me." Garrett kept his tone respectful but immovable as oak. Harrison stepped forward, words slightly slurred but carrying the practiced authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "We took this girl in out of the goodness of our hearts when she had nowhere else to go. No one else who wanted her. We fed her, clothed her, sent her to school, community college." Kat's voice emerged barely above a whisper, but it carried in the sudden silence. "You sent me to community college while Sienna went to Harvard." The quiet that followed felt dangerous, like the moment before a tree starts to fall. Garrett watched realization dawn on faces around them. 300 guests in designer clothes, finally seeing what had been invisible all evening. "How dare you?" Victoria's composure cracked like cheap veneer. How dare she, what? The new voice cut through Victoria's building tirade with the authority of age and accumulated fury. Eleanor Hastings approached with her walker, 82 years old, and blazing with octogenarian rage. Because I remember the headlines, Harrison. Ashford Properties, CEO, opens heart and home to orphaned girl. Right next to the articles about families losing their homes because of your layoffs. Gasps rippled through the growing audience. Someone had stopped the jazz quartet entirely. Every eye in the reception hall had turned toward their corner. Kat found her voice, then soft but gaining strength with each word. Years of suppressed truth spilling out like water through a broken dam. I wasn't allowed to eat dinner with the family. I had an 8 p.m. curfew while Sienna could stay out all night. You introduced me as a charity case you support at the country club. Her voice grew stronger, decades of practiced silence breaking apart. I heard you tell your friends that taking me in was the best business decision you ever made, Harrison. The best business decision. Victoria stepped forward, hand rising, but Garrett moved too. Not aggressively, just there. Immovable. Finish that sentence. His voice dropped to something quiet and dangerous. Please give me a reason. The bride herself rustled over then $30,000 of lace carried by two bridesmaids like something sacred. Sienna's face was a mask of cold beauty, cracks showing at the edges. Mother, please. People are watching. Let them watch. Eleanor's walker thumped against the floor for emphasis. Let them see how you treat family. Sienna turned to Kat, eyes like chips of ice. You're ruining my wedding. No, Eleanor interjected before anyone else could speak. Your family's cruelty is ruining your wedding. This young woman deserved love, not a decade-long business arrangement. Kat stood abruptly, her whole body trembling like aspen leaves in wind. I need air. I'll come with you. Garrett's response was immediate, automatic. They walked out together, leaving behind 200 stunned guests and a family whose carefully constructed image had just shattered like the champagne glass Harrison threw against the wall in impotent fury. The garden terrace was cool and quiet scandal muffled by distance and glass doors. Kat leaned against the stone railing, her body shaking with suppressed sobs. 10 years. 10 years of believing if I was just quiet enough, helpful enough, invisible enough, they'd actually love me. Garrett stood beside her, not touching, just present. His father taught him that sometimes the best help was just showing up. Tell me about the accident. She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. The night sounds filled the space, distant traffic wind through expensive landscaping, the muted chaos they'd left behind. Power line came down in a storm. Hit our car. My parents died instantly. I was trapped for 3 hours with my arm crushed under the collapsed roof. They had to. She gestured at the prosthetic with her left hand. I was 15. The Ashfords showed up at the hospital with photographers. Victoria held my hand for the pictures, then didn't touch me again for 6 months. Garrett's jaw tightened. My wife died 3 years ago. Brain aneurysm. 1 minute she was laughing at breakfast, next she was gone. His voice roughened with the memory that still felt fresh some mornings. I know it's not the same, but I understand something about loss, about existing in spaces where you don't quite belong, trying to be invisible enough that no one asks you to leave. Kat turned to really look at him then. Why did you really come to my table? Because I saw someone who needed to know they weren't alone. And because... He paused, choosing words carefully. Because something about you reminded me that staying silent in the face of cruelty makes us complicit. My wife would have been halfway to that corner already. She never could stand seeing someone isolated. Your wife would be proud of you. I hope so. Garrett's smile carried sadness and something warmer underneath. She would have liked you, had this way of seeing people who were trying to disappear and making them feel seen in the best way. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching expensive cars arrive for guests who'd heard about the drama and wanted to witness the aftermath. We should go back in. Kat's voice held resignation. Only if you want to. She straightened her shoulders, that steel core Garrett had glimpsed earlier, reasserting itself. I'm not giving them the satisfaction of running away. The reception had devolved into chaos during their absence. Half the guests had left in disgust, according to the shocked whispers. The other half clustered in groups, furiously discussing what they'd witnessed. But Eleanor Hastings had commandeered the microphone at the head table, her voice carrying across the ballroom with surprising strength. 53 years of marriage taught me something. Family isn't about blood or adoption papers or tax write-offs. It's about choosing to love someone every single day, especially when it's hard. She looked directly at the Ashfords, who sat at the head table like ice sculptures, rigid and cold. Some of you could learn from that. The rest of the reception passed in a blur of surreal normalcy and underlying tension. Garrett and Kat danced to one slow song, her single hand wrapped around his neck, his hand steady at her waist, anchoring her against the storm of attention. Other guests approached throughout the evening, some offering support, others sharing their own stories of casual cruelties they'd witnessed from the Ashfords over the years. The accounts piled up like evidence in a trial the family had already lost. At midnight, as the reception finally ended, Sienna approached one last time. Her makeup had run, leaving black streams down her perfect cheeks like war paint smeared by defeat. "Are you happy now?" she hissed at Kat. "You've destroyed everything." "No." Kat's reply came quiet but certain. "You destroyed it the day you let them put me at that table alone." Sienna's hand rose as if to slap her, but Garrett caught her wrist with the kind of gentle firmness he used to prevent wood from splintering. "Touch her, and I ensure every newspaper in the state runs this story. With photos." Sienna yanked free and stormed off, designer train dragging behind like the remnants of her reputation. The ride back to Garrett's truck was silent. Kat sat in the passenger seat while Ivy dozed in the back, exhausted from her evening of waiting. The little girl had woken briefly when they first got in, assessed Kat with solemn 9-year-old wisdom, and announced, "You look sad. Dad says nobody should be sad alone." Then she'd fallen back asleep, secure in the simple certainties of childhood. "Where do I go now?" Kat's question emerged small, uncertain in the darkness of the parking lot. Garrett started the engine, giving himself time to think. The offer he was about to make was probably stupid, definitely complicated. But Elena's voice echoed in his memory the fierce sense of justice that had made her spend her final years volunteering at shelters, organizing fundraisers, standing up for people who couldn't stand for themselves. "My place has a guest room. Nothing fancy, needs a fresh coat of paint, and the bed's older than me. But it's honest space if you need somewhere to think. I can't impose on you like that. You don't even know me. I know enough." Garrett pulled out of the parking lot, headlights cutting through the darkness. "I know you deserve better than what you've gotten. Let us be your soft landing." Kat stared out the window at the city sliding past, lights blurring through unshed tears. "Why are you doing this?" "Because Ivy made me promise to make a friend." Garrett kept his tone light despite the weight of what he was really saying. "And because you remind me that good people exist in spaces where they're not always valued. My wife taught me to see that, to act on it." They drove in silence for a while, the city giving way to suburbs, to the working-class neighborhood where Garrett had built his life from honest labor and careful savings. His house sat on a corner lot, 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch that needed new boards in a few places. The yard needed mowing, had needed it for 2 weeks now, but time kept slipping away between job sites and Ivy's school projects and the endless maintenance of keeping a household running solo. It wasn't the architectural showcase Kat had just escaped, but something about it tugged at something deep. Garrett could see it in the way her shoulders relaxed slightly as they pulled into the driveway. The wind chime on the porch tinkled in the night breeze. A basketball hoop over the garage with a frayed net. Ivy's bicycle leaning against the steps because no amount of reminding got her to put it in the shed. Signs of actual living, not just existing. Ivy woke up properly as Garrett lifted her from the car seat, automatically wrapping her arms around his neck. "Is the lady coming inside, Dad, if she wants to?" Kat stood by the passenger door, still holding the wooden carving from the wedding like a lifeline. "Your daughter doesn't even know my name." Ivy's head lifted from Garrett's shoulder, studying Kat with sleepy curiosity. "What's your name, Catherine? But you can call me Kat. I'm Ivy, like the plant. Mom said it means faithfulness." She turned to Garrett with the abrupt subject changes of childhood. "Can Kat see my rock collection?" "It's almost 1 a.m, sweetheart. But I found a really good geode yesterday. Kat should see it." Garrett met Kat's eyes over his daughter's head, offering a tired smile. "Looks like you've been recruited." The inside of the house matched the outside, comfortable, lived-in, slightly chaotic in the way single-parent households often were. Ivy's artwork covered the refrigerator. Dishes in the sink from breakfast that morning, a half-finished wooden boat on the kitchen table, Garrett's current project with his daughter. But everything Garrett had built himself showed in the details. The kitchen cabinets with their perfect joinery, the staircase with its smooth banister shaped to fit a child's hand, the built-in bookshelves flanking the fireplace, each shelf adjusted to different heights for different purposes. Kat's architect eye caught it all. Garrett could tell by the way she paused, really looking at the craftsmanship most people missed. "Did you build all this?" "Most of it. The bones were here when I bought the place, but everything else is mine. Keeps me busy between paid work. It's beautiful." She ran her left hand along the doorframe, feeling the grain he'd spent hours sanding smooth. "Your wife was lucky. I was the lucky one." Garrett set Ivy down gently. "Now, young lady, show Kat your geode, and then it's bedtime. For real this time." The rock collection lived in 3 shoeboxes under Ivy's bed, organized by a classification system only a 9-year-old could fully understand. She pulled out stones one by one, explaining their names mostly made up and origins highly suspect with absolute confidence. Kat sat cross-legged on the floor, asking questions that showed genuine interest rather than adult condescension. When Ivy handed her the prized geode, still dusty from wherever she'd found it, Kat held it like the treasure the child believed it to be. "This is magnificent. Did you break it open yourself?" "Dad helped. But I picked the hammer. That's the most important part." Garrett leaned against the doorframe, watching his daughter and this woman who'd walked into their lives 6 hours ago connect over rocks and shared experience of feeling different. Ivy didn't stare at Kat's prosthetic or ask intrusive questions. She simply accepted Kat's presence as natural, the way children did before the world taught them to see differences as deficits. After Ivy finally fell asleep, sprawled sideways across her bed in the boneless way of exhausted children, Garrett showed Kat to the guest room. It was small, sparsely furnished, with a double bed covered in a quilt his mother had made before arthritis stole her ability to sew. "It's not much. It's perfect." Kat set down the small purse she'd carried from the wedding, the only possession she had beyond the clothes on her back. That simple assertion of ownership, of belonging even temporarily, felt revolutionary to ears accustomed to borrowed space and borrowed time. Garrett nodded, understanding in his bones what she wasn't saying. "Towels are in the bathroom across the hall. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen. I'm usually up by 6, but sleep as long as you need." He started to leave, then paused at the door. "Eleanor was right, you know, what she said about family. It's not about blood or papers. It's about choosing." Kat's eyes shone with unshed tears in the dim hallway light. "Thank you. For tonight. For this. For seeing me. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to come whether we're ready or not." Garrett lay awake in his own bed for a long time after listening to the familiar sounds of his house settling. Somewhere in the guest room, Kat was probably doing the same. 2 people who'd learned through hard experience that kindness often came with conditions, trying to trust that maybe just this once it didn't. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from Eleanor Hastings somehow having gotten his number. "You did good work tonight." Thomas would have approved. Elena, too. He stared at the message, wondering how the old woman knew his wife's name, knew anything about him beyond the carpenter hired to build tables. But Eleanor Hastings had a reputation for knowing things, for seeing connections others missed. Another text followed. "Don't let that girl go back to them. She's stronger than she knows, but strength needs shelter sometimes." Garrett typed back, "No plans to. She's safe here." The response came immediately. "Good. Sleep well, Carpenter. You've earned it." He set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. Elena's absence a physical ache some nights. She would have been proud tonight, would have grabbed Kat's hand the moment she saw that isolated table, consequences be damned. Her fierce sense of justice had been one of the first things he loved about her back when they were both 22 and convinced they could fix the world's problems through sheer determination. They'd managed to fix their small corner of it at least. Built this house board by board, raised Ivy with love and intention, created something real from nothing but commitment and carpenter's wages. Now Kat was sleeping in the room they'd always meant to turn into a home office, never quite finding the time before Elena's death made everything else seem trivial by comparison. The last thought Garrett had before sleep finally claimed him was wondering what Thomas Brennan had been like. What kind of man raised a daughter who could sit alone at that table with her head high even while breaking inside? The kind who carved wooden knives for his daughter, probably. The kind who taught her that good architecture started with honest hands. The kind Garrett hoped he was becoming even on days when it felt easier to look away from other people's pain. Morning arrived with the smell of coffee and wood shavings. Scents so intertwined in Garrett's life they might as well have been genetic. Kat woke to unfamiliar ceiling beams, hand-hewn and fitted with joints she could appreciate even through the fog of too little sleep. Sunlight filtered through curtains that had seen better days falling across the quilt with its pattern of interlocking rings. The prosthetic needed recalibration. The sensors always got finicky after stress. She sat on the edge of the bed working through the adjustment sequence muscle memory from 13 years of practice. Through the thin walls came the sound of Ivy chattering about something involving dinosaurs and Breakfast Garrett's deeper voice responding with patient amusement. A family. An actual family doing actual morning things without performance or calculation. Kat's phone had died somewhere around 2 a.m. 23 missed calls from Victoria, and 17 texts ranging from fury to threats to something almost approaching pleading. She'd turned it off rather than read them. Now in daylight the choice felt both liberating and terrifying. The bathroom across the hall was small but meticulously maintained. Garrett had rebuilt the vanity himself, she could tell from the joinery and the way the drawers glided on wooden runners instead of metal tracks. Someone who built with this much care didn't cut corners in life either. She found them in the kitchen, Ivy perched on a stool mixing pancake batter with the intense concentration of a surgeon performing delicate work. Garrett stood at the stove, hair still damp from his own shower, wearing jeans and a faded t-shirt, advertising a lumber company that had probably gone out of business years ago. Morning. You drink coffee like it's a religious requirement. Kat accepted the mug he poured, solid ceramic made by someone who understood the weight of a good cup. Black's fine. Ivy looked up from her mixing bowl batter, speckling her nose. Dad makes the best pancakes. They're lumpy, but that's the secret ingredient. Lumpy is structural integrity. Garrett flipped something on the griddle with practiced ease. Can't have pancakes falling apart under syrup pressure. The absurdity of sitting in a stranger's kitchen discussing pancake engineering while her entire life imploded made Kat want to laugh or cry or possibly both. She settled for sipping coffee and watching Garrett work with the economy of motion that came from years of solo parenting. Her phone buzzed back to life on the counter where she'd left it charging. 31 new notifications. She ignored them all except the one from Warren Mitchell, her CFO at Brennan Design Group. Call me. Urgent. Not Ashford urgent. Real urgent. Can I use your phone? Mine's about to explode and I don't trust it right now. Garrett handed over his without hesitation, the kind of trust that came from either stupidity or genuine decency. Kat was betting on the latter. Warren answered on the first ring, his voice tight with controlled panic. Catherine. Thank God. Where are you? Somewhere safe. What's happening? Preston Ashford held a press conference an hour ago. He's claiming you stole proprietary designs from Ashford Properties when you were a teenager living in their house. Says you built your company on intellectual property theft. The coffee turned to acid in Kat's stomach. That's insane. I was 15 when my father died. I didn't start the company until I was 21. He's got lawyers spinning it as a long con, saying Harrison was too kind-hearted to press charges when they first discovered it. Warren's keyboard clicked in the background. It gets worse. He's contacted 3 of our major clients, told them working with us exposes them to liability. Jacobson Development already pulled their contract. Sterling Properties is reviewing their options. Those 2 contracts alone represented 40% of their revenue. Kat's hand tightened on the phone hard enough to make the plastic creak. What about Riverside? Still with us but nervous. Their legal team is asking questions we need to answer fast. How fast? End of business today or they walk. Warren's exhale crackled through the speaker. Kat. I've been doing this 30 years. I've never seen anyone come after a competitor this hard, this fast. What the hell happened last night? I stopped playing along. Kat watched Ivy carefully pour batter onto the griddle, Garrett's hands hovering nearby, ready to catch but not taking over. I'll come to the office. We'll figure this out. The board is meeting at 10. They're concerned. Warren's pause said more than his words. Mitchell wants your resignation. Temporary, he says, until this blows over. But you know how these things work. Mitchell had been pushing for more control since Kat refused to sell to a larger firm 6 months ago. This was his opening and he'd take it with both hands. I'll be there. Kat ended the call, thumb hovering over the power button. The weight of what she'd set in motion last night pressed down like a collapsing roof, familiar in the worst way. Garrett slid a plate of pancakes in front of her, lumpy and perfect. Trouble. The kind that ends careers. She forced herself to take a bite. It was excellent butter and maple syrup, soaking into imperfect structure warmth, spreading through her chest like hope she couldn't afford. Ivy studied her with the unnerving perception children sometimes deployed without warning. Are you sad because of mean people? Something like that? Yeah. Dad says mean people are like termites. They eat away at stuff from the inside, but if you build strong enough, they can't bring you down. She delivered this wisdom with absolute certainty, then returned to drowning her own pancakes in enough syrup to constitute a natural disaster. Garrett met Kat's eyes across the table. Out of the mouths of babes. I need to go to my office. Face this head on. Kat pushed back from the table, appetite gone, despite the excellent pancakes. Thank you for breakfast. For everything. I'll find a hotel. You'll stay here. Garrett's tone allowed no argument. At least until you've got a plan that doesn't involve giving those bastards what they want. You don't know what you're offering. This could get ugly. Will get ugly. I've seen ugly before. Lost my wife to a medical system that prioritized paperwork over people. Watched Ivy ask me why Mommy wasn't coming home while I tried to figure out how to explain brain aneurysms to a 4-year-old. Garrett's jaw tightened, old grief and newer anger mixing. Rich people playing games with other people's lives doesn't scare me. It pisses me off. The drive to Brennan Design Group's offices took 40 minutes through morning traffic that gave Kat too much time to think. Garrett had insisted on coming along, leaving Ivy with a neighbor who apparently functioned as their informal child care network. The solidarity felt foreign and uncomfortable and necessary all at once. The building was small compared to Ashford Properties' downtown tower, but it was hers. 6 stories of honest architecture her father would have appreciated, bought with 7 years of 18-hour days and contracts won through talent rather than connections. Warren waited in the lobby, 58 years old and looking 70 this morning. His tie was crooked, a sure sign of stress for a man who'd worn perfect Windsor knots every day since 1987. Conference room 3. The board's already here. Kat straightened her shoulders, feeling the prosthetic calibrate to her posture. Who's the angry mob today? Mitchell's leading the charge. Freeman and Davison are backing him. Thompson's on the fence. Lucas and Park are with us, but they're outnumbered. 3 votes to force her out. 4 if Thompson broke the wrong way. The conference room smelled like expensive coffee and cheaper fear. 6 board members sat around the table Brennan Design had built when they first moved into this building. Kat had helped install it herself back when she still had time to work with her hands instead of just directing them. Mitchell didn't bother with pleasantries. We've lost 2 major contracts in 12 hours. Our reputation is being systematically destroyed by one of the most powerful families in the state. This requires decisive action, decisive or cowardly. Kat took her seat at the head of the table, the CEO chair her father never got to sit in. There's a difference. The difference is liability. Mitchell slid a folder across the polished surface. Our lawyers say if there's even a chance these theft allegations stick, we're looking at lawsuits that could bankrupt us. Your temporary resignation protects the company. My permanent removal protects your takeover plans. Kat didn't open the folder. We all know what this is really about. This is about survival. Freeman spoke up, nervous energy making him tap the table. Harrison Ashford has resources we can't match. He can bleed us dry in court even if we're innocent. So we roll over. Show every bully in this industry that if they hit hard enough, we'll surrender. Kat leaned forward. My father built this company on the principle that good work speaks for itself. Running away calls everything we've built a lie. Your father is dead. Mitchell's voice dropped to something meant to sound sympathetic but landed closer to patronizing. And you're letting sentiment override business sense. The board has a fiduciary duty to protect shareholder value. I am the majority shareholder. Kat's fingers drummed against the prosthetic, the faint clicking audible in the quiet room. This company exists because I built it from nothing after the Ashfords tried to turn me into their pet charity case. You want me to hand them a victory now? Thompson finally spoke the swing vote everyone was waiting for. Catherine, maybe a temporary step back isn't surrender, just strategic retreat. Let this blow over, come back when the legal situation is clearer, and in 6 months when Mitchell's consolidated control. When the company my father died for is running Ashford-approved projects and cutting the same corners that killed him. She stood palms flat on the table. I won't resign. Fire me if you want, but I won't make it easy. The meeting devolved into legal posturing and veiled threats. Mitchell demanded a vote. Park and Lucas held firm in Kat's corner. Freeman and Davison backed Mitchell. Thompson wavered, then abstained, the political coward's favorite move. Deadlock meant the status quo held at least temporarily. But Kat could see the writing in the wood grain. Mitchell would be working phones before lunch, building his coalition, promising stability and profit margins over principle. Warren caught up with her in the hallway outside her office. That could have gone worse. Give it time. Kat unlocked her door muscle memory from 7 years of arriving first and leaving last. Any word from Riverside? Their lawyers want documentation proving you didn't steal designs, every project file from the company's founding. They want proof the work is original. The files were in her office safe, backup drives and original sketches going back to her first project, a community center redesign that had paid for 6 months of ramen and sleepless nights. Kat pulled them out, handling each drive like the fragile legacy it represented. This is everything. Her voice came out rougher than intended. Every building, every design, every hour, my father taught me to see structures as more than just walls and windows. If that's not enough proof, nothing will be. Warren took the drives with the reverence they deserved. I'll get these over to Riverside's team. Meanwhile, we need to talk about the Prescott Memorial Bridge project. The bridge. Kat had almost forgotten in the chaos of the last 12 hours. The city was taking bids for the memorial structure at the site where her father and 12 other workers had died when Ashford Properties cost-cutting caused a catastrophic collapse. Submissions were due in 2 weeks. Ashford Properties is bidding. Warren's expression was grim. Harrison announced it this morning, calling it a chance to honor the victims and demonstrate our commitment to safety. The optics are strong. The optics are bullshit. Rage burned through Kat's exhaustion like oxygen feeding fire. They killed those men. My father. Now they want a profit off a memorial. The bid is expected to come in around $80 million. We can't match that. Can barely afford to bid at all with our current cash flow situation. What if we didn't try to match it? Kat's mind was already racing, seeing possibilities in the negative space. What if we built something better for less? You're thinking of underbidding on a municipal project where lowest cost usually means lowest quality. I'm thinking we do what my father would have done. Build something honest, something that means what it says. She pulled up the preliminary specs on her computer, studying the requirements through new eyes. The city wants a memorial bridge. Ashford will give them steel and concrete and a plaque. We'll give them something people will actually remember. With what money Warren's pragmatism was earned through 3 decades of keeping architecture firms solvent. Our line of credit is maxed. The bank won't extend more with our current situation. Then we build it ourselves. Kat's certainty crystallized into something approaching a plan. Hand tools, local craftsmen. The way bridges were built before corporations decided speed mattered more than soul. You're talking about a project that could take months. The bid timeline is 2 weeks. 2 weeks for the proposal, 6 months for construction. We document every step, show the city what real craftsmanship looks like versus Ashford's assembly line approach. Kat could see it now, the vision taking shape. My father was a carpenter before he was an architect. He taught me that good buildings start with good hands. Let's prove it. Warren studied her for a long moment. You're either crazy or brilliant. Possibly both. I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions. Kat pulled up a blank CAD file. Help me find craftsmen who still know how to build with integrity. The list came together over the next 3 hours. Warren knew people had connections throughout the construction world from 40 years in the industry. Stonemasons who still hand-cut joints. Metal workers who forged instead of welding when the project demanded it. And one master carpenter whose work Warren had admired for years. Garrett Pierce. He does custom work mostly. High-end residential, some commercial. Expensive as hell, but worth every penny. Warren pulled up a portfolio. Look at this joinery. This is someone who learned from the old masters. Kat looked at the photos of Garrett's work staircases that flowed like water cabinetry that seemed to grow organically from walls. Tables with grain patterns matched so perfectly the wood looked like single pieces instead of joined boards. The same hands that had made pancakes this morning had created this. I know him, actually staying at his place temporarily. Warren's eyebrows rose. The carpenter from the wedding. The one who made the Ashfords look like the jackasses they are. The same. Kat was already calculating how to approach this. We need him for the bridge project. But he's got a daughter, a career. He can't drop everything for my vendetta. Maybe ask anyway. Let him decide what he can or can't do. Warren closed his laptop. I'm heading over to Riverside. Try to salvage that contract before Mitchell burns it down. You should go home. Get some rest. This fight is just starting. Home. The word felt strange applied to Garrett's house, but nowhere else fit. The Ashford estate hadn't been home in 13 years. Her apartment was corporate housing temporary by design. Brennan Design Group was a building full of dreams and debts. But a house with lumpy pancakes and rock collections and a man who built beauty from raw lumber that felt closer to home than anything she'd known since her father died. Garrett was in his workshop when Kat arrived, the converted garage space filled with the scent of fresh-cut wood and machine oil. He was working on something delicate, a jewelry box maybe running a piece through the table saw with practiced precision that made the dangerous look effortless. He shut down the saw when he saw her pushing safety glasses up into his hair. How bad 2 clients gone. Board wants me out. Ashford Properties is bidding on the memorial bridge for my father. Kat leaned against the workbench, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. So pretty bad. What do you need? The question was so direct, so free of games or calculation, that Kat felt something crack in her carefully maintained composure. I need to build something my father would be proud of. I need to prove the Ashfords don't get to win just because they're rich and ruthless. I need help from someone who understands that craft matters more than profit. Garrett set down his tools with deliberate care. What kind of help? The kind that takes 6 months and pays maybe a quarter of your usual rate and probably makes you a target for one of the most vindictive families in the state. Kat forced herself to meet his eyes. I'm designing the memorial bridge. Real craftsmanship, hand-built by people who care more about legacy than shortcuts. I need a master carpenter. I need you. 6 months is a long time. I've got Ivy to think about. School activities, the whole parenting thing. I know. It's too much to ask. I didn't say no. Garrett picked up the jewelry box piece, examining the grain in the afternoon light. My daughter thinks you're strong people. Says you're fighting termites. She's got good instincts about character. She's 9. Old enough to see what matters. Garrett set the wood down. Elena used to say the only way to honor good people who die is to keep building good things. Your father sounds like he was good people. The best. Kat's throat tightened. He taught me to see buildings as conversations between the architect and the people who'll use them. Every choice either says you matter or you don't. The Ashfords spent 13 years telling me I don't. I'm done accepting that answer. Then let's build something that says otherwise. Garrett extended his hand, calloused and strong from 3 decades of honest labor. 6 months. Quarter rate, all the termites we can handle. The partnership formed in a handshake felt more solid than any contract Kat had ever signed. They worked through the evening sketching preliminary concepts while Ivy did homework at Garrett's drafting table, occasionally offering suggestions that were simultaneously childish and surprisingly insightful. The bridge design took shape slowly, organically, driven by function and meaning rather than flash. Garrett suggested wooden walkways, instead of concrete, harder to maintain, but warmer, more human. Kat proposed stone pylons hand-carved with the names of the 13 men who died, the letters becoming part of the structure rather than just plaques bolted on afterward. This is going to cost more than we can afford. Kat ran numbers on her laptop, watching the budget implode in real time. Even at reduced rates, the materials alone put them over what the city was likely to accept. What if we didn't buy everything? Garrett pulled up a map on his phone. There's a salvage yard in Riverside. Old-growth timber from demolished buildings, stone from torn-down churches. Materials with history getting a second life. Reclaimed materials. Kat's mind raced through possibilities. It fits the memorial concept. Nothing wasted, everything honored. Plus it's cheaper than new. Garrett's pragmatism balanced Kat's idealism in ways that felt productive rather than limiting. I know the owner. Helped him build his office last year. He owes me a favor. How big a favor? The kind where he might give us materials at cost if we let him bid on the metalwork. His son's a blacksmith. Old school, does everything by hand. Kat leaned back, looking at the sketches scattered across Garrett's workshop. This could actually work. We could actually build something beautiful and meaningful and affordable. Or we could fail spectacularly and both end up broke. Garrett's smile took the edge off the warning. But at least we'd fail doing something worth failing at. Ivy looked up from her homework pencil, pausing mid-equation. Are you guys building something important? Yeah, sweetheart, something very important. Garrett ruffled her hair. A bridge for people who deserved better than they got. Like Kat, Ivy's question hit with the accuracy of a nail gun. Exactly like Kat. The board meeting 3 days later felt like a sentencing hearing. Mitchell had spent the interim building his coalition, promising stability and market-rational decisions. He'd convinced Thompson to break the deadlock, giving him the votes to force Kat's resignation pending the resolution of Ashford's legal threats. Warren fought it line by line, arguing precedent and fiduciary duty and shareholder rights. Park and Lucas backed him with passion if not persuasiveness, but the math was simple: 4 votes beat 3. Kat listened to the parliamentary procedure that was stripping away 7 years of her life with something approaching detachment. She'd prepared for this. Had documents ready, transition plans drafted, letters of recommendation for staff she knew Mitchell would purge the moment he took control. What she hadn't prepared for was Garrett walking into the conference room at the meeting's midpoint, Ivy in tow, carrying a wooden case that looked older than he was. Mr. Pierce, this is a closed board meeting. Mitchell's annoyance crackled through his professional veneer. Warren Mitchell, right, CEO of Mitchell Capital Management. Before you retired to board positions. Garrett set the case on the table with care. I've got something you need to see before you vote. We've already voted. The motion passed 4-3. Then I guess this is just for your education. Garrett opened the case, revealing something wrapped in oilcloth. This belonged to Thomas Brennan. His tools from when he was still a carpenter, before architecture school, before he built the company his daughter's been trying to honor while you've been playing power games. He unwrapped the cloth, carefully revealing hand tools that had been maintained with the kind of love reserved for sacred objects. A hand saw with Thomas Brennan's initials carved into the handle, chisels worn smooth from decades of use, a marking gauge that looked like it predated electricity. These tools built houses, honest houses for honest people. Then Thomas went to school, learned the theory behind what his hands already knew, and built bigger things, better things. He never forgot where he came from, never cut corners to save money or time. Garrett picked up the saw, running his thumb along the blade edge. This saw was in his hand the day the Prescott Bridge collapsed. He was checking a joint the contractor said was fine, but Thomas knew wasn't. The bridge killed him for being right. Mitchell's expression wavered between irritation and uncertainty. This is touching, Mr. Pierce, but irrelevant to our fiduciary obligations. Your fiduciary obligation is to the company Thomas built, not to your own ambitions, not to Harrison Ashford's threats. Garrett set the saw down gently. Catherine came to me 3 days ago. Asked me to help build a memorial bridge for her father and the 12 men who died with him. Asked me to do it for a quarter of my usual rate because that's what the budget allows. Asked me to work with reclaimed materials and hand tools and old-school methods that take time but create something lasting. He pulled a folder from his jacket, sliding it across to Mitchell. This is the preliminary design. This is what craftsmanship looks like when you care more about legacy than profit. This is what Thomas Brennan would have built if he'd lived to design his own memorial. Mitchell opened the folder, his resistance visibly crumbling as he saw the sketches. The bridge design was beautiful in its simplicity, elegant in its honesty. Every element served both function and meaning, nothing wasted, nothing false. You're asking us to invest in a project we can't afford while removing the CEO who could execute it. Garrett's voice carried the kind of quiet authority that came from knowing his worth. That's not fiduciary responsibility. That's fear dressed up as business sense. Thompson spoke for the first time since the vote. How much would this cost the company? If we win the bid, nothing. We'd operate as independent contractors. If we lose, we've spent 2 weeks on a proposal that demonstrates Brennan Design Group's capabilities to every city official judging submissions. Warren had clearly coordinated this with Garrett beforehand. Either way, we prove the company's values are more than marketing copy. Mitchell stared at the designs for a long moment. I moved to table the resignation pending submission of the bridge proposal. If the city rejects it, Catherine steps down voluntarily. If they accept it, we revisit this conversation after the project completes. It wasn't perfect, but it was breathing room. Kat felt something unknot in her chest, tension she'd been carrying for days, releasing all at once. The vote passed 6-1 with only Freeman holding out for immediate removal. Garrett collected his father-in-law's tools with the same care he'd displayed unpacking them. Outside the conference room, Kat caught up with him in the hallway. You didn't have to do that. Risk your reputation on my fight. Wasn't just for you. Garrett wrapped the tools back in their oilcloth. Elena spent the last year of her life volunteering at a shelter for abuse survivors. Came home every night angry that the world let bad people hurt good ones with so little consequence. She made me promise something before she died. What? That I'd use my hands to build things that mattered, not just pretty furniture for rich people, but things that pushed back against the casual cruelty she saw everywhere. Garrett closed the case. This bridge matters. Your fight matters. So yeah, I had to do that. Ivy tugged on his sleeve. Dad, can we get ice cream now? You promised. I did promise. Garrett looked at Kat. You coming? Success deserves celebration even when it's temporary. The ice cream shop was the kind of local institution that survived on nostalgia and the objective superiority of hand-churned flavors. Ivy ordered something involving gummy bears and chocolate that defied description. Garrett got vanilla because he was apparently 80 years old in his soul. Kat chose salted caramel, the sophistication of the adult who still wanted dessert. They ate on the bench outside, watching evening traffic flow past with the kind of purposeless observation that came from exhausted relief. Ivy chattered about her science project, something involving volcanoes and baking soda that seemed destined for disaster. Garrett listened with the patience of a man who'd learned that parenting was 50% attention and 50% damage control. Kat's phone buzzed. A text from Sienna Ashford, her supposed sister, the first communication since the wedding. Can we talk not family business, just us? The message felt like a trap, but Kat found herself responding anyway. When and where, tomorrow. Starbucks on Main. Just coffee. I promise. Promises from Ashford's carried the weight of smoke, but something in the phrasing felt different. Kat agreed, already regretting the decision, already knowing she'd show up anyway. Garrett noticed her expression shift. Trouble maybe, possibly, probably. Kat showed him the texts. My sister wants to meet. She's never wanted to meet before, not without witnesses or photographers or specific instructions on what to say. Could be genuine. Garrett finished his ice cream with methodical efficiency. People surprise you sometimes. Usually when they're tired of being who everyone expects them to be. And if it's a setup, then we deal with it. Garrett met her eyes. You're not alone in this anymore. Whether you wanted a partner or not, You've got one." The certainty in his voice carried the weight of 30 years building things meant to last. Kat found herself believing him despite every survival instinct that screamed trust was expensive and payment came due in blood. The Starbucks on Main Street smelled like burned espresso and desperation, the kind of chain ubiquity that made every city feel identical. Kat arrived 10 minutes early, a habit learned from years of meetings where punctuality was weaponized. Sienna was already there, hunched over a grande something or other in the back corner, makeup, minimal designer clothes replaced with jeans and a sweater that looked suspiciously off-rack. The transformation was jarring. This wasn't the glossy bride from 5 days ago, wasn't the ice princess who'd watched Kat's humiliation with satisfaction. This was someone who'd been crying recently, whose hands trembled slightly around the paper cup. "Thanks for coming." Sienna's voice emerged smaller than Kat remembered, stripped of the practiced confidence that came from growing up Ashford. "I wasn't sure you would." Kat slid into the opposite chair, keeping her posture defensive. "You've got 15 minutes. Use them wisely. I brought these." Sienna pushed a banker's box across the table, heavy enough to make the surface shake. "Financial records, emails, contracts, everything you need to prove. Father's been laundering money through construction projects for at least a decade." The box sat between them like a live grenade pin already pulled. Kat stared at it, then at Sienna, searching for the trap that had to be hidden somewhere in this gesture. "Why?" The question came out harsher than intended. "Why turn on your own family because they killed your father?" Sienna's composure cracked, tears tracking mascara down her cheeks despite the minimal makeup. "And 12 other men. And I've known for 6 years but was too much of a coward to do anything about it. Preston showed me the emails when I was 19. Thought it would make me respect Father's business acumen. All it did was make me complicit." Kat pulled the box closer, lifting the lid. The documents inside were meticulously organized, color-coded tabs marking different projects, different crimes. Email chains where Harrison ordered material substitutions, invoices showing payments to shell companies, inspection reports that had been altered after the fact. This is enough to destroy him, to destroy all of them. Kat's fingers trembled as she sorted through evidence of casual evil, of profits prioritized over human lives. Her father's name appeared in one email chain, Harrison writing to Preston Brennan's making noise about the bridge supports. Reassign him to the South Tower inspection. By the time he gets back, the concrete will be poured. 2 days later, the bridge collapsed. Sienna wiped her eyes with a napkin. "I'm done being the good daughter. Done pretending Father's business practices are acceptable because they're profitable. Daniel left me. Said he couldn't marry into a family that treats people like disposable resources. Eleanor won't speak to me. She's right not to." Eleanor Hastings, who'd stood up at the wedding with the kind of moral clarity that came from 82 years of watching people reveal themselves. Kat wondered what the old woman would make of this moment, this betrayal that wasn't really betrayal. "What do you want from me?" Kat closed the box, already planning how to get it to the FBI without contaminating the chain of evidence. "Absolution, forgiveness. We're not suddenly sisters just because you brought receipts. I don't want anything." Sienna stood gathering her purse with hands that still shook. "I just needed you to know that not everyone in that house was okay with what happened to you. I should have spoken up years ago, should have done 1,000 things differently. This doesn't fix any of it, but maybe it stops them from doing it to someone else." She left before Kat could respond, disappearing into the mid-morning crowd with the hunched posture of someone carrying weight they'd finally decided to set down. Kat sat with the box for a long time, coffee cooling, untouched mind, racing through possibilities and implications. This evidence would trigger federal investigations. RICO charges, probably. Asset seizures, criminal trials, the complete dismantling of everything Harrison Ashford had built on the backs of cut corners and dead workers. The vindication should have felt sweet. Instead, it tasted like ash and unfinished business. Her phone rang. Warren, his voice tight with controlled excitement. "Riverside just confirmed. They're staying with us. Got the documentation reviewed, decided the Ashford accusations were baseless. We keep the contract. One crisis averted." Kat shouldered the box, feeling its weight, both literal and metaphorical. "I've got something bigger. Evidence. Real evidence about the Prescott Bridge collapse. How real FBI level real. Warren, we need lawyers, not corporate counsel. Criminal defense for whistleblowers. People who know how to navigate this without getting buried. I know someone. Former federal prosecutor now does white-collar defense. She's expensive but worth every penny. Warren paused. Kat, if we do this, there's no walking it back. The Ashfords will come at us with everything. They're already coming at us with everything. This just gives us ammunition to shoot back. The lawyer's name was Patricia Vance, 63 years old, with a reputation for eviscerating corporate criminals and a fee structure that made Kat's eyes water. But Warren was right. She was worth it. Within 2 hours of reviewing Sienna's documents, Vance had contacted the FBI's white-collar crime division and arranged for Kat to deliver the evidence under whistleblower protection. The FBI field office was utilitarian and bureaucratic, the kind of government space designed to strip away pretense. Special Agent Marcus Webb took Kat's statement with the methodical precision of someone who'd heard 1,000 stories of corporate malfeasance and believed maybe half of them. But the documents spoke louder than Kat's testimony. Webb's expression shifted from professional skepticism to genuine anger as he worked through the evidence, particularly the email chain about Thomas Brennan's reassignment. This is prosecutable. Webb closed the last folder, making notes in handwriting so precise it looked typed. We'll need to verify everything, cross-reference with project records, interview witnesses. But if this is authentic and preliminary review suggests it is, we're looking at multiple felonies. Fraud, negligent, homicide, racketeering. How long until charges? Kat's exhaustion was catching up with her adrenaline fading to leave raw nerves and too many hours without real sleep. Months, realistically. We need to build an airtight case. Harrison Ashford has resources to fight this for years if we give him openings. Webb's expression softened slightly. But we will nail him. Men like this who think money makes them immune to consequences, they're why I took this job. The bridge proposal consumed the next 10 days. Kat and Garrett worked 16-hour shifts, her designing and refining while he prototyped joints and stress-tested materials in his workshop. Ivy became their de facto assistant, fetching tools and asking questions that occasionally sparked solutions neither adult had considered. The design evolved organically, driven by Garrett's understanding of how wood bore weight and Kat's vision of what the memorial should communicate. Not grandeur or permanence, but honest acknowledgement of loss and the continuation of life despite it. Reclaimed timber from a demolished century-old church became the walkway planks. Stone from a torn-down courthouse provided material for the pylons, each one to be hand-carved with names and dates by a stonemason Garrett knew who worked the old way with hammer and chisel instead of laser cutters. The metalwork would be forged by hand, traditional blacksmithing techniques, creating railings that looked organic rather than industrial. It would take longer, cost more in labor, even at reduced rates, but the final product would carry weight beyond its physical structure. Warren ran numbers, constantly finding money in places Kat didn't know existed. A line of credit against her personal assets. Deferred payments from suppliers willing to bet on Brennan Design Group's reputation. A small grant from a historical preservation society that appreciated reclaimed materials. It was enough. Barely. The bid came in at $43 million against Ashford Properties' projected $80 million. Lower cost, longer timeline, higher risk, but infinitely more meaningful. The submission deadline was a Friday at 5 p.m. Kat delivered the proposal herself, a physical binder alongside the digital files, because some things deserve the weight of paper and ink. The city planning director accepted it with professional neutrality, giving no indication whether she found the design compelling or quixotic. Now we wait. Warren loosened his tie the first time Kat had seen him less than perfectly composed. Presentations are in 2 weeks. We'll know then. 2 weeks to prepare for a presentation that would either validate 7 years of work or confirm Mitchell's assessment that Kat was too emotional to run a business. 2 weeks while the FBI built their case and the Ashfords circled like sharks who'd scented blood. Garrett was waiting in the parking lot, Ivy asleep in the back seat despite the early hour. He'd brought coffee in a thermos, the good stuff from the local roaster, and handed it over without comment. "How you holding up?" Ask me after I've slept for a week? Kat sipped the coffee, letting the warmth spread through her chest. Thank you. For all of this. You didn't sign up for federal investigations and corporate warfare. Signed up to build something worth building. Garrett leaned against his truck, comfortable in his own skin, in a way Kat envied. The rest is just noise. Besides, Ivy thinks you're a superhero. Can't disappoint a 9-year-old. The tenderness in his voice when he mentioned his daughter spoke to depths Kat was only beginning to understand. Garrett Pierce had lost his wife, survived grief that would have broken weaker people, and emerged with his capacity for love intact. That took strength most folks never needed to develop. Stay for dinner. Kat surprised herself with the invitation. I mean at my place. The apartment. I should probably check if it's been condemned in my absence. The apartment was fine impersonal in the way corporate housing always was. Functional furniture, neutral paint, nothing on the walls because Kat had never felt settled enough to commit to decoration. 7 years in this space and it still looked move-in, ready, a monument to her assumption that permanence was for other people. Garrett studied the emptiness with the same attention he gave wood grain. You don't actually live here, do you? You just sleep here sometimes between work. Didn't seem worth personalizing. Kat opened the refrigerator, finding exactly what she expected, condiments and expired leftovers. Takeout it is. Ivy woke up long enough to request pizza with pepperoni and extra cheese, then dozed off again on Kat's couch. Garrett covered her with a throw blanket that was the apartment's only concession to comfort, tucking it around her with practiced efficiency. She's been worried about you. Keeps asking if the mean people are still being mean. What do you tell her? That mean people don't stop being mean just because we want them to. But strong people don't stop being strong just because it's hard. Garrett settled into the chair across from Kat. She seems to accept that. The pizza arrived greasy and perfect, the kind of chain mediocrity that tasted better than it should at 9 p.m. after an exhausting day. They ate in comfortable silence. Ivy snoring softly from the couch, the city visible through floor-to-ceiling windows that were the apartment's only redeeming feature. Can I ask you something? Kat set down her third slice, suddenly not hungry. Why are you really doing this? The bridge, the partnership, all of it. You could have walked away after the wedding. Should have, probably. Garrett chewed slowly, considering. When Elena died, I spent about 6 months operating on autopilot, getting Ivy to school, doing jobs, going through motions. Then one day she asked me why I stopped building the playhouse I'd promised her. I didn't have a good answer. Realized I'd let grief turn me into someone who went through life instead of living it. He leaned back, hands clasped behind his head. Elena made me promise 2 things before she went. First, that I'd raise Ivy to see injustice and do something about it instead of just complaining. Second, that I'd use my hands to build things that pushed back against the casual cruelty she saw everywhere in her social work. So, this is honoring her memory. This is honoring her life. There's a difference. Garrett's expression carried old pain and newer peace. She'd have liked you, would have grabbed your hand the moment she saw that table at the wedding. She had this way of seeing people who needed backup and providing it whether they wanted it or not. I would have liked her too. Kat meant it. Anyone who raised a daughter like Ivy and loved a man like Garrett had clearly understood something fundamental about being human that the Ashfords never would. The moment stretched between them, comfortable and charged simultaneously. Garrett stood collecting paper plates with methodical efficiency. We should get going. Ivy needs an actual bed. You could stay. The words emerged before Kat's brain approved them. I mean, the couch pulls out. Ivy's already asleep. No point waking her to drive across town. Garrett studied her face, reading something Kat wasn't sure she was ready to acknowledge. You sure know. But I'm tired of only doing things I'm sure about. Kat held his gaze. Stay, please. They converted the couch, carefully working around Ivy's sleeping form with the coordination of people learning each other's rhythms. Garrett fetched bedding from his truck, always prepared apparently for spontaneous sleepovers. Kat found extra pillows in the hall closet, remnants of a life she'd never quite committed to living. Ivy barely stirred during the transfer, settling into the pull-out bed with the boneless trust of childhood. Garrett sat beside her for a moment, brushing hair back from her face with a tenderness that made Kat's throat tight. "Guest room's down the hall." Kat gestured vaguely, suddenly awkward in her own temporary home. "Bathroom's stocked. Help yourself to whatever. Where will you sleep?" "My actual bedroom, shockingly enough." The sarcasm came easier than sincerity. "I do occasionally use furniture for its intended purpose." But Garrett didn't move, and Kat found herself not moving either, standing in her impersonal apartment at nearly 11 p.m. with a man she'd known for less than 2 weeks who'd somehow become essential to her ability to function. "This isn't just about the bridge, is it?" Garrett's question carried no judgment, just curiosity and something warmer. "This partnership?" "No." Kat's honesty surprised her. "It's about finding out that kindness without calculation still exists, that people can choose to help without needing something in return, that I don't have to earn basic human decency." "You never did. You just met people who made you think you did." The distance between them was maybe 4 feet, close enough to cross far enough to maintain plausible deniability, but neither moved, the air between them heavy with possibility and caution. "I should let you get some sleep." Garrett's voice was soft. "Big day tomorrow." "Yeah, big day." Kat didn't step back. "Garrett, you don't have to say anything." His smile was gentle. "I'm not going anywhere. We've got time to figure out what this is." The relief that flooded through Kat was unexpected. No pressure, no demands, just presence and patience from someone who understood that trust took time to build, especially for people who'd learned the hard way that safety was an illusion. They slept in separate rooms that night, maintaining boundaries that felt important even if the chemistry suggested otherwise. Kat lay awake, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of other people in her space, Ivy's occasional sleep murmurs and Garrett's steady breathing through walls too thin for privacy. It should have felt intrusive. Instead, it felt like the apartment had finally remembered its purpose. The FBI moved faster than Webb had predicted. Harrison Ashford was arrested on a Tuesday morning. Perp walked out of Ashford Properties' downtown headquarters in handcuffs, while news crews captured every second. RICO charges, federal fraud, negligent homicide. The indictment read like a greatest hits compilation of white-collar crime. Preston was arrested the same day, along with 3 vice presidents and the company's general counsel. Assets were frozen pending investigation. Contracts were suspended. The Ashford empire that had seemed untouchable 48 hours ago was collapsing in real-time broadcast across every news channel. Kat watched it happen from Brennan Design Group's conference room, Warren and Patricia Vance flanking her like protective barriers against the chaos. Her phone exploded with calls from reporters, clients, former classmates who suddenly remembered they'd been friends, vultures circling the fresh kill. Victoria Ashford called too, her voice stripped of its usual imperious certainty. "You did this. You destroyed us." "No." Kat kept her tone even, refusing to give Victoria the emotional reaction she wanted. "Harrison destroyed you when he decided profit mattered more than lives. I just stopped pretending otherwise. We raised you, fed you, educated you, gave you everything. You gave me a cage and called it charity." Kat ended the call, blocking the number immediately. Patricia nodded approval. "Clean break. No more contact unless it's through lawyers." Vance had handled enough abuse cases to recognize patterns. They'll try to manipulate you through guilt. Don't let them. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. Kat would testify along with former employees and whistleblowers who'd been terrified to speak up while Harrison wielded power. The case was strong, Vance assured her. Conviction was likely. But likely wasn't certain, and Harrison Ashford hadn't built an empire without learning how to fight. The bridge presentation happened 5 days after the arrest's, timing that was either perfect or catastrophic depending on perspective. The City Planning Committee had serious questions about Brennan Design Group's ability to execute a major project while its former patron family faced federal prosecution. Kat stood before the committee with Garrett beside her, the physical model of their bridge design commanding the table like a sculpture. Every joint was visible, every material choice explained through function rather than aesthetics. The stone pylons were rough-hewn in the model, showing where names would be carved. The wooden walkway gleamed under the conference room lights, reclaimed timber that had supported worship for a century now, repurposed for remembrance. This bridge isn't about architectural innovation. Kat's voice was steady, years of presentations training her to project confidence even when her stomach churned. It's about honest construction, honoring honest lives. My father died on this site because someone chose cost savings over safety. 12 other men died with him. This memorial should tell the truth about that, not through grand gestures, but through materials that carry history and craftsmanship that respects their sacrifice. Garrett stepped forward, hands resting on the model. Every piece of this bridge will be hand-fitted. Every joint will be visible because we're not hiding anything. The metal railings will be forged by blacksmiths using techniques from the 1800s, because some things shouldn't be rushed for efficiency. The stone carving will take 3 months because names deserve to be more than laser-etched labels. His voice carried the conviction of someone who'd spent 3 decades proving that quality mattered. This will cost less than Ashford Properties' proposal because we're not paying for corporate overhead or profit margins. We're paying craftsmen fair wages to do work they'll be proud of. Work that will stand for 100 years because it was built to last, not built to contract specifications. The committee deliberated for 90 minutes. Kat and Garrett waited in the hallway, Ivy between them doing homework with admirable focus given the circumstances. When they were called back and the planning director's expression gave nothing away. We've reviewed both proposals extensively. Ashford Properties offered a technically sound design with proven contractors and a timeline we could rely on. Your proposal offers something we didn't know we were missing: a memorial that actually remembers. The committee chair stood, extending her hand to Kat. Congratulations. Brennan Design Group has been awarded the contract. We look forward to seeing this bridge built. The relief hit like a physical force, years of pressure releasing all at once. Warren was waiting outside with champagne and plastic cups because apparently he'd been confident enough to plan celebration. Patricia Vance reviewed the contract with lawyerly precision, finding no traps or problematic clauses. Garrett lifted Ivy onto his shoulders, spinning her around while she shrieked with delight. We did it, kiddo. We're building a bridge, a real bridge, like with my name on it if you want. Garrett's joy was infectious, pure and uncomplicated. You helped design it. Kat watched them, this man and his daughter who'd crashed into her life and somehow become the foundation keeping her upright. 13 years of the Ashfords had taught her that family was a weapon. Love was conditional, trust was expensive. 2 weeks with Garrett and Ivy was unraveling every lesson, replacing cynicism with something terrifying and essential. Warren raised his plastic cup in toast. To Thomas Brennan, to honest work, to bridges that actually connect people instead of just spanning gaps. They drank cheap champagne in a municipal building hallway, celebrating a victory that would require 6 months of back-breaking work to actually achieve. But for this moment, the possibility was enough. The weeks before groundbreaking blurred together in a chaos of permits and material orders and crew coordination. Kat moved permanently into Garrett's house, abandoning the sterile apartment for a space that smelled like sawdust and possibility. Ivy claimed her as family with the casual certainty of childhood, introducing Kat to friends as my cat who's building a bridge with my dad. The relationship between Kat and Garrett developed in the spaces between work-stolen moments in the workshop after Ivy went to bed, shared coffee before dawn planning sessions, hands brushing as they adjusted blueprints. They didn't talk about what they were becoming, didn't need to. The progression felt as natural as wood grain, inevitable and organic. 3 days before the groundbreaking ceremony, they worked late in the workshop, finalizing the last construction details. Ivy was at a sleepover, giving them rare solitude. The silence between them was comfortable, broken only by the scratch of Kat's pencil on paper and the rasp of Garrett's hand plane on wood. I've been thinking. Kat set down her pencil, turning to face him. About what comes after the bridge is done. Garrett stopped working, giving her his full attention. And I don't want to go back to how things were. The corporate housing, the 70-hour weeks, the life built around avoiding feelings. Kat took a breath. I want this. You, Ivy, the workshop at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. Real life instead of the performance I've been giving for 13 years. What are you saying? Garrett's voice was careful hope tempered by caution. I'm saying I love you. Kat met his eyes directly. I know it's fast. I know we're in the middle of chaos. I know Ivy needs stability and you've got a whole life that doesn't include someone else's baggage, but I love you anyway. The workshop was quiet except for the distant sound of neighborhood traffic and Kat's racing heartbeat. Garrett set down his tools with deliberate care, crossing the small space to stand in front of her. I've loved you since the wedding, since I watched you walk out of that ballroom with your head high, even though you were breaking inside. He cupped her face with calloused hands that smelled like pine and linseed oil. Knew then you were someone worth building a life with. Someone Ivy and I were lucky to find. The kiss was different from the tentative ones they'd shared before. Deeper, more certain, a promise rather than a question. When they finally pulled apart, Kat felt lighter than she had in years. So we're doing this, building something together. We've been doing it for weeks. Garrett smiled. This just makes it official. Ivy's going to be insufferable when she finds out. Already planning the wedding, probably. Let her plan. Garrett pulled Kat close, her head resting on his shoulder. We've got time to figure out the details. Right now, I'm just grateful we found each other. They stood there in the workshop, surrounded by wood shavings and blueprints. Two people who'd survived loss, learning that survival could become living if you let the right people in. Ground broke on the Prescott Memorial Bridge on a cold October morning, 15 years to the day after the original collapse. The ceremony was small by city standards, no politicians making speeches, no ribbon-cutting theatrics. Just families of the 13 men who'd died, workers who'd signed on to the project, and city officials who'd approved the design. Kat stood at the edge of the excavation site, Garrett on her left, Ivy on her right, holding the shovel that had belonged to Thomas Brennan. The tool had been found in storage and restored to working condition, its wooden handle worn smooth by her father's hands. The families gathered close, some holding photos of loved ones, others clutching hard hats or work gloves preserved as relics. Mrs. Patricia Dunham held her husband's lunchbox, the metal dented from the collapse that had killed him. Mr. Robert Foster carried his son's carpenter's level, still perfectly calibrated, despite 15 years in a box. Kat had prepared remarks, words written and rewritten, searching for adequate tribute. But standing here with the weight of grief and hope pressing in from all sides, the prepared speech felt hollow. She spoke from the heart instead. My father believed good buildings start with good hands and true hearts. She looked at the assembled families, at the workers ready to begin construction, at Garrett, whose steady presence anchored her. The bridge that collapsed here was built with neither. Corners were cut. Safety was sacrificed. 13 men paid with their lives for someone else's greed. Her voice strengthened, carrying across the construction site. This new bridge will be different. Every piece hand-fitted by craftsmen who care more about legacy than profit. Every joint visible because we're not hiding anything. Every name carved by hand because the men who died here deserve more than laser-etched labels on a plaque. She gestured to the model displayed nearby, the same one that had won the contract. This isn't the most expensive memorial. It's not the fastest to build. But it's honest. It tells the truth about what happened here and why it matters. Kat accepted the shovel from Ivy, feeling its familiar weight. Her father had used this tool to build homes for honest people before architecture school taught him theory to match what his hands already knew. He'd been holding it the day he died, checking joints the contractor said were fine, but Thomas knew weren't. Being right had killed him. She drove the shovel into earth that had been consecrated by tragedy, beginning the work of transformation. The blade bit deep, turning soil that would become the foundation for something better. Garrett stepped forward next, adding his strength to the symbolic gesture. Then Ivy's small hands gripping the handle with fierce determination. Then the families, one by one, each turn of the shovel a ritual of grief and hope intermingled. Mrs. Dunham wept as she moved earth where her husband had died. Mr. Foster's hands shook, but his face was set with purpose. A daughter no older than Ivy scattered wildflower seeds into the fresh dirt, creating life in a place of death. When everyone had participated, the actual construction crew took over. The foreman, a master stonemason named Vincent Caruso, who'd worked with Thomas Brennan years ago, surveyed the site with professional assessment. 6 months to completion if weather holds. Caruso's voice carried the authority of 40 years building things meant to last. We'll work through winter if we have to. This bridge gets built right or it doesn't get built. The workers nodded agreement. A crew assembled not for cheapest bid, but for commitment to craft. Carpenters who understood joinery, metalworkers who forged by hand, stonemasons who carved names with reverence instead of efficiency. As the ceremony concluded and families began to disperse, Eleanor Hastings approached with her walker. The 82-year-old architect had been Thomas Brennan's mentor, his friend, his colleague in the years before Ashford Properties corrupted everything they touched. He'd be proud. Eleanor's voice was strong despite her age. Not just of the design, but of you. You grew up in that toxic house and still became someone who builds instead of destroys. I had good teachers. Kat gestured to Garrett, to the bridge model, to the construction site itself. Dad taught me to see structures as conversations. This bridge says what he never got to finish saying. It says he mattered. Eleanor gripped Kat's hand with surprising strength. They all mattered. Thank you for remembering that. The old woman turned to Garrett, assessing him with the sharp eye of someone who'd evaluated people and buildings for 6 decades. You're the carpenter, the one who stood up at the wedding? Yes, ma'am. Patricia would have liked you. My granddaughter. Eleanor's expression softened with memory. She believed in the kind of love that shows up when it's hard. You did that for a stranger. That takes character most people don't have. Garrett's ears reddened slightly. Just did what felt right. That's how you know it was right. Eleanor's walker thumped as she prepared to leave. Take care of each other. The world's got enough people tearing things down. We need builders. As the sun climbed higher, burning off morning chill, Kat and Garrett stood at the edge of the excavation, watching workers establish the foundation grid. Ivy had found a pile of rocks and was conducting a geological survey with the seriousness of a professional mineralogist. This is really happening. Kat's voice held wonder. We're actually building it. Did you doubt we would every day? Kat leaned into Garrett's warmth. Every single day I thought something would go wrong. The Ashfords would sabotage us, the city would pull funding, the FBI case would collapse. But it didn't. Garrett wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Sometimes things work out because they're supposed to, because enough people decided to do the right thing even when it was hard. The preliminary hearing for Harrison Ashford was scheduled for next month. Preston had agreed to testify against his father in exchange for reduced charges. Sienna had been granted immunity for her cooperation. The Ashford empire was dismantling itself from the inside exactly as empires built on exploitation always did when pressure got applied. But that was someone else's problem now. Kat's fight had moved from courtrooms to construction sites, from revenge to remembrance, from destroying the past to building a future worth inheriting. 6 months. Garrett voiced what they were both thinking. 6 months of mud and cold and 1,000 things that could go wrong. 6 months of building something that matters, Kat corrected. Of proving my father's death wasn't meaningless. That good work still counts for something in a world that values profit over people. It counts. Garrett kissed the top of her head. We'll make sure it counts. Ivy ran over, clutching a particularly impressive rock specimen. Look, it's got crystals inside. Can we use it in the bridge? That's geode material. Garrett examined it seriously. Too small for structural use, but we could incorporate it into the dedication plaque. What do you think, Kat? I think it's perfect. Kat knelt to Ivy's level. Every piece of this bridge should mean something. This rock represents you finding beauty in unexpected places. The girl beamed carefully, pocketing her treasure. I'm going to find more. Lots more. This bridge is going to be the most beautiful bridge ever. She ran off on her quest, leaving the adults smiling at her enthusiasm. She's going to run this company someday. Kat watched Ivy investigate the construction site with fearless curiosity. Going to build things that make my work look primitive. Our company. Garrett's correction was gentle, if you want that. Equal partners building something neither of us could do alone. The offer hung in the air, monumental in its simplicity. Brennan Pierce Design Group. A partnership built on mutual respect instead of exploitation, on craft instead of corners, on the belief that how you build matters as much as what you build. Yes. Kat's answer came without hesitation. Equal partners. In business and everything else. Everything else covered a lot of territory, raising Ivy together, building a life that felt like home instead of performance, creating something that would outlast them both. It was terrifying and essential, and exactly what Kat needed. The first support pylon was scheduled to go in next week, reclaimed stone from the courthouse that had once dispensed justice and would now support memory. The timber for the walkway was already being prepared, century-old beams from a demolished church finding new purpose. The metal railings were being forged in a blacksmith shop, each curve shaped by hand and intention. In 6 months, the Prescott Memorial Bridge would span the site where 13 men had died because someone valued profit over human life. It would carry pedestrians and cyclists across a gap that had been literal and metaphorical, connecting neighborhoods that had been divided by tragedy. More than that, it would stand as proof that good work still mattered, that craftsmanship could triumph over corporate expediency, that people who'd been broken by loss could rebuild themselves into something stronger than before. Kat looked at Garrett at Ivy hunting rocks at the construction site where her father's legacy was being transformed from grief into purpose. For 13 years, she'd survived by making herself small, invisible, useful enough to keep, but never valued enough to truly belong. Now she was building bridges, real ones and metaphorical ones, connecting her past to her future, her father's dreams to her own reality, her wounded heart to people who saw her worth without requiring proof. Ready to get to work? Garrett extended his hand. Kat took it, calluses meeting prosthetic meeting skin, 3 different textures united by intention. More ready than I've ever been. They walked toward the construction trailer together. Ivy racing ahead to show Vincent Caruso her geological findings, the morning sun burning away the last of the mist to reveal the foundation of something built to last.